There are many people out there who know at least a little bit about the autism spectrum. For example, some people think that autistic people are fair-skinned males who speak in monotone and have a single obsession that they cannot stop talking about. Some people think that autistic people create awkward statements, don't really know right from wrong, avoid detention, and usually say the wrong thing at the wrong time. Some people think that autistic people are socially awkward and lack humor and empathy. Now, if you agree with everything I just said, I'm sorry to tell you, but you do not have the right impression of autism. How do I know? Because I have autism. I do have my own obsessions, such as with electronics and music, but that's not what defines me. All of us are different and unique in our own way. The only problem is there's not a lot of information out there on what an autistic life actually looks like. So people often resort to stereotypes, and these can often be seen in the media. For example, there's a show on Netflix called Atypical, and in that show, it's supposed to be about the life of an autistic teenager named Sam. I watched the first episode of that show, and in that 36-minute episode, there are at least 15 stereotypes, half of which came from the first 8 minutes of the show. One of the biggest problems with that episode is that the poor parents are stuck in the unfortunate predicament of having to care for an autistic teenager. But isn't this show supposed to be about autistic experience? What about Sam's life? It's as if he has no feeling at all, no humanity. In that show, we learn more about what goes on in mom and dad's head than we do about Sam, the autistic teenager. Another stereotypical TV show is The Good Doctor. In that show, a white male autistic teenager becomes a very intelligent surgeon, which sounds good, but not every autistic person is a super genius. If I want to get really high marks in school, I have to put in a lot of effort. Okay, now that my don't believe what you see on TV rant is done, I'll get to the point. Did you know that there are some people that want to find a cure for autism? That's because they see it as a negative thing, as a disease. But in reality, autism is not a disease. It's just another way of thinking and looking at the world. My mind communicates differently than all of your minds. It's similar in a way with comparing an Xbox and a PlayStation, which have different programming, but are both highly capable. But what would happen if you tried to play your Xbox game on a PlayStation? It wouldn't really work, because the PlayStation, just like my mind, communicates differently. Does that mean the PlayStation is diseased? Does that mean I am diseased? Let me check. Look at my hair today, guys. It's so nice. No, I'm not diseased. I notice a lot of difference between me and some of my non-autistic classmates. There are quite a few areas that we just aren't really the same in. For example, with music, most of my classmates like to listen to whatever's popular nowadays, or rap or hip-hop or something like that. The music I listen to comes from personal experience in school choirs and church choirs, whatever my parents like to listen to and all of that stuff. Sometimes I listen to the same song over and over again, like when I want to keep reliving that solo I did a while back. Another area that we're different in is interests. I do have some common interests with most people, such as playing video games. However, there are other things that, unlike most people, I am really not cool with doing, such as going to large parties, like this one. My senses are extremely sensitive, and one thing that really bugs me is loud noises. I remember there was one time I was coming home from a field trip, and several other kids on the bus were playing the game Heads Up. I was like, guys, just let me have some peace. And depending on the person, there are quite a few things that can be overwhelming for us, such as aversions to bright lights, strong smells, and gooey textures, all with the potential of creating anxiety. So what do we do during those times where all the senses are just overwhelming for us? What we do is something called stimming. Basically, stimming is a repetitive motion or a noise or just something that helps to calm us down. It's basically our way of zoning out. Depending on the person, some autistic people flap their arms or make random noises or spin or do other things that may or may not seem normal. I had learned to stim in a hidden way, so in the heads up scenario, I pulled out my phone and I played quite a few levels of Angry Birds, a game I'm not actually that good at. Although if I were at home, I probably would have spun random objects like this to relax. It is very necessary for autistic people to stim. However, we live in a world where it's frowned upon to stim, so we are forced to hide it. And when we're forced to hide our autistic traits like this, it's called masking. And it can be really hard to pretend to be someone that we are not. Depending on the person, some people mask better than others. I actually mask so well sometimes that hardly anyone really suspects me of having autism until I give them the big reveal, like I did with you guys. However, at the end of the day, I just get really stressed out, and ordinary things such as homework become really difficult tasks. Some people think that masking is the way to cure autism because of how we act normal, but all it does is it makes us ashamed of showing our true selves. The reason why it's hard for autistic people to cope in today's society is because the world just isn't built for us. There are many ways we can become overwhelmed, such as sensory overloads and social rules, and the insistence that we have to act normal or else we appear disabled. Another stereotype that many people believe is that autistic people lack empathy. That's actually not true. I have lots of empathy. However, I find it really hard to express myself. Let's say you're watching the news and something really tragic comes up, like a war or a famine or something. We'd all feel really bad for the people involved. However, the difference is you guys would all be able to express your feelings. However, I'm not really too sure how I'm supposed to do that, so I'm forced to hide it. And I don't show as much empathy as non-autistic people do. Emotional expression, however much or however little, is hard for me. That's because I'm bursting inside with every single emotion you could possibly imagine. Obviously, I can't express that the way I feel it. Otherwise, let's say happiness, for instance, would come out as a huge burst of gleeful wheezing, hand flapping, and loud vocal woohoos, whereas you may just smile. Let's say it's your birthday and you just got the best gift ever. We'd all feel really happy, of course. You'd probably be like, "Oh, thank you so much. I've always wanted something like this." However, with me, I'm regulating my emotions. So the most I can really say without bursting is, "Oh, cool, it's the new video game I wanted. Thanks." The same thing goes with listening to a friend's struggles in life. Often I feel really bad for them, and I'm always shaking with empathetic anxiety inside. But to appear normal, I regulate my emotions. So usually I end up saying, "It's okay, it'll get better soon, right?" Yeah, my inner feelings are unlimited, but on the outside, I can only express extremes or nothing. So yeah, my emotions are a bit off sometimes, and I think differently than everybody else, and that's why I'm diagnosed with autism today. But wait, why is it a diagnosis? I'm not ill. I just think a bit differently. According to a recent Canadian statistic, 1 in 68 children and teens in Canada are diagnosed with autism, which sounds like a lot of people, but we're still a minority. And while many people are aware that autism exists, do they actually accept autism? I actually live in a family with one other autistic person, my mother. Yes, adult women can also have autism and can also be autistic. And I live with 2 non-autistic people, my dad and my younger brother. My younger brother's actually here right now. Hi, Orion, wherever you are. Yeah, so we may not understand each other all the time, but we get along most of the time. And we love each other, and we see each other as equals. But in Atypical, Sam's parents couldn't do this. So how can we do this? The best way you can accept the autism community is through something called neurodiversity. The author Steve Silberman talks about neurodiversity in his book Neurotribes. He says that autism and other mental conditions should be seen as naturally human and not as defects, something I agree to with all my heart. If everyone accepted mental health conditions as normal, then the world would be a much better place and there'd be a lot more inclusion. Just because I don't think like you or act like you doesn't mean I'm not human. And I think everyone should be proud of who they are, just as I am proud to have autism. Thank you.